so this is probably fine.
Nope, we're live.
Oh,
Okay,
I see
yeah.
the button.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool. Looks like we're going.
Hi, I'm Ben Furman,
And I'm Nate Blyton.
and this is Patch In, the show from SoundNotion.tv dedicated to the wonderful world of electroacoustic music. Let's start with some news.
So one of my first pieces of software I got started on, it was using Cakewalk, Acid, and Fruity Loops. We're way on to FL Studio 20 now. It's out. There's a fully native Mac version, which Ben is griping about because that removes his last excuse for not having to use the program. This is not the first time they've tried a Mac version, however. A previous version used the Wine as a wrapper for the Windows code, but this is the first time they've made a completely native version for the Mac, which obviously was probably a lot of work rewriting all the code and restructuring everything. So for all of the Fruity Loops users out there, if anybody still calls it that, you've now got your native Mac version.
Yeah. And I did download it, and it does work on my Mac, so unfortunately I'll probably have to field tech questions about that when the semester starts up again.
Exactly.
Oh well, that's life. But for a lot of our listeners, you probably know Moogfest has just wrapped up. Former guest Margaret Shadle was doing a set there, which awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But Moog dropped a bit of a surprise there. We had all heard about the new subharmonic semi-modular synth that you could build as part of their engineering VIP workshop, which included, I think it was 8 hours of soldering and $1,500 to get into the workshop. But they also dropped a new toy, the Grandmother semi-modular synthesizer, which has an attached FITAR keyboard on it. So in addition to 32 keys, it has 41 points for patch cables, a built-in arpeggiator, spring reverb inside the case, MIDI, and the classic ladder filter for a whopping $1,000.
Thanks.
They've got a bunch of demo videos out. It has a very retro look with color-coded segments on it for the different parts, like the arpeggiator is yellow. There's different VCOs in different colors. Yeah,
it's charmingly retro. It's a wonderful thing. I love the idea that there's an actual spring in there. Do you know if that's true?
It is true. One of the demo videos I watched, the guy starts whacking it with his fist on the side, and it's affecting the spring verb. So yes,
excellent.
Oh goodness gracious!
You gotta love spring verb because it's the only reverb where you can physically attack the tank and get a change to the sound.
Yeah, and all the indie rockers can like get that spring whack sound by just hitting the synth now too. It's great. It's great.
So expect to hear this in future Mumford & Sons releases or, I don't know, other post-rock stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of albums, former guest on the show and friend of the show, JJ Kidder, has a new album out called A Wild Liberty. It's available on Bandcamp, and it explores the geologist Grant A. Mincy's essay of the same name, which is about the sixth great extinction that we are currently going through due to anthropomorphic climate change and all of the horrible, horrible stuff that we're doing with destroying the earth. In fact, Mincy also provides the vocal samples that are used on several tracks, reading his own essay, talking about things like the Earth's climatic history, strip mining in Appalachia, and pretty much everything else. It's fairly cool album. There are parts where I'm listening to it and going, is that a synth or is that a guitar? It is, in fact, all synth. I did have to go and check through the liner notes. Yeah. Highly recommend it. Very, very fun.
Yeah. I always like it when people blur lines like that or make sound without it being really clearly an instrument in particular. So, yeah, it's great. So we'll certainly have a link to that in the show notes. Yeah, you can check it out. So back to so back to software news. Apparently, I'm the software correspondent for this news segment. Steinberg is finally stopping all VS2 SDK's support as of October. So it's kind of funny. In the announcement, they start with like this disclaimer, like back in 2013, we said we were going to do this. 5 years later, this is now actually really finally wrapping up. Hopefully, all the plugin makers will port their VSTs over to VST3 sooner than later, as that will now be the main thing. It sounds like.
Yeah, and Steinberg is pretty notorious for transitioning their own products over to VST. First to VST2 and then to VST3 as soon as the new technology is out for about a year or so. So they've already been doing this for a while with their own products. Things like Cubase and Dorico, it's VST3 all the way. There is no VST2 support unless you do a lot of editing of configuration files that can potentially destroy your installation.
Yep.
So, yep, update those plugins.
Yeah, got a couple more months.
Yeah. But got a couple more months, and until then, we have a guest for the show. She is a composer, harpist, artist, web designer, and currently pursuing a doctorate in composition at University of Virginia, but you all probably know her as the technical director for the beloved electroacoustic Barn Dance Festival. So welcome to Becky Brown.
Hi, everybody. And also, I guess we haven't like announced it yet, but I am actually going to be passing my job on to Austin O'Rourke. So up until very recently, the tech director of the electroacoustic Barn Dance. But I think I will be running next year's NSEM, the National Student Electronic Music Event. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just saw that on, I think it was Twitter or Facebook before we started recording.
Yeah. So I think the official announcement for that will be at some point. But yeah, it's a thing of like, you know, the festival is a learning opportunity, and it was probably about time for someone else to learn through it. So sad but happy. So yeah.
Well, and Austin will be more than capable of taking it on.
Austin can do it.
Cool.
And then speaking of EABD, I believe there is a deadline for submissions for that coming up relatively soon.
Deadline is, I believe, I thought it was June 15th.
I think it's June 15th, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I had this thing of like, wait a minute, does that mean it's June 1st? It's not June 1st. I put together the call. I know this. Yeah, it is June 15th, and that is for day concerts, after hours, installations, and paper sessions. So, yeah, submit to the Barn Dance.
Indeed, it's always a blast. And this is going to be a bizarre 2 barn dances in 1 year. Yeah,
because we couldn't do it in 2017. Because when Mark started at Jacksonville University, obviously they kind of already had their program calendar already set up. And they have a lot of ensembles that have a lot of concerts. So there wasn't really space. So the first time he could get it was in February. But now, you know, now that he's been there, they were able to get the like concert hall slot in the usual November time. So that's why. Yeah, but it has been weird trying to put the materials together and distinguish between 2018 spring and fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, having just been down there for the February EABD, I will shamelessly plug it as a wonderful festival. You guys did a great job. Except for the townies who freaked out.
There's always townies who freak out. It's fine.
Yeah. It was nice to see that there was a billboard that the school put up.
That was awesome.
Nice. But that also brings us to the first work we're going to talk about today, which is your work, Tomorrow When I Grow Up, Part 1, The Empties, which you performed at EABD and then later at Seamus.
Yeah.
And probably many, many other times that I did not see.
Not a ton, but it has been performed elsewhere, yeah. you want me to talk about it first, or?
Yeah, but I will just preface this by saying your performance at EABD was sort of unintentionally ironic.
Yeah.
As you were incredibly sick at the time,
Yeah.
and the text took on a totally different meaning.
Yeah. So I'm assuming the music gets spliced in at some point, but
Yeah.
I don't know when. I'm assuming it's like a thing in post because I mostly remember what it sounds like.
Yeah, we didn't
Oh, yeah.
we didn't talk about that, and we can So if that's okay with you, we'll do segments. We probably would have done it about in place of this little bit.
That's fine.
Right now.
We'll just assume that your words are getting lost to the ether once this becomes. Yeah. So the core phrase, which was this piece has gone through a lot of iterations. The first time I played it, it was exclusively me talking about the sentence, "I will be better tomorrow, I promise," and slowly making that sentence make less and less sense through repetition. But I've had versions where I've said more different things, and versions where I have said, "I will be better tomorrow, I promise," in a lot more ways. But obviously at the barn dance, I decided it would be a great idea to get the flu the Sunday before the barn dance. So "I will be better tomorrow, I promise" was also like, yeah, I guess, I mean, I wasn't better, but I felt a lot better that next day.
Well, and throughout the preceding days, you had been wearing the face mask.
Yep.
Too.
I'd been wearing a blue, I guess it's supposed to be a dust mask for if you're, I don't know, doing a lot of woodworking. Someone later said that it probably didn't do as much as I thought it did, but I didn't hear of anyone getting the flu immediately after the barn dance. So I think it helped.
Success, either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's mostly supposed to be a piece about lying, more or less. This idea of you are forced to respond to what you hear, but only when prompted to, and you don't really have any control over what you're saying or whether you're going to be able to finish saying it, or what it even is that you are saying, or if that thing makes any sense in context or out of context, or if it's even words, which a lot of my pieces, I guess this is a good way to start talking about this, a lot of my pieces are really personal. So it was kind of about a time in my life where I was sort of lying to everyone that I was close to, and kind of how that felt. Because there's this thing of, eventually once you spin the web enough, you don't really have any control over what it is that you basically have to say at that point to keep the thing going, which sucks a lot. And I only kind of wrote the piece because it was this thing of, okay, I got out of it, and now, the after effects are happening and I have to deal with those. And I probably also need to write something about it, so I did. So that's that piece. And I am intending to make it a multi-movement work. I'm still not too sure what the other two movements are going to be. I just know that they need to be there. The initial idea was the second one would be sort of about depression and using that same concept of something outside is triggering you to say something. In this case, it would almost be the thing of that feeling of, okay, all I need to do is get up. I just need to get up. I just need to get up. And that instead of being triggered by a bell that you can't control, it's instead the performer has to do something in order to trigger the sound to continue. I just have to write it. And then the third one would kind of be recovery. But I feel like I kind of can't write the third one until I finish the second one. So that one's still kind of in the ether as well at the moment. So, yeah.
What a neat thing for the content to be dependent on the process of making.
Very.
Yeah.
Well, and then from reading about this on your website, the performance is also very dependent on your emotional state at the time.
Yeah, I try and freak myself out.
Yeah.
Because I kind of have to. Otherwise, it doesn't feel that honest. So pretty much every performance, there is a section beforehand, either the day before or like 45 minutes before, where I'll like reorganize some of the sentences, or especially for Seamus, I like spliced a bunch of stuff, added new things, added triggers where there weren't triggers before, removed triggers that were there. Because the whole point is that it's supposed to make me feel anxious because it's a very kind of anxiety-inducing piece and state of mind. Because it's essentially like you're constantly anxious because will someone figure it out? When is the next time someone's going to ask me a question that I'm not going to know how to respond to? So it's one where, like, you know, there's part of me that would love to, like, I don't think it would work as kind of an algorithmic max piece, because I feel like the amount that I would have to do to make it so that it follows this arc would be kind of outrageous. And it also means that I can't run it so that it's just me in this fixed media file, because every time I basically have to go into the arrangement and screw it up so that I don't know what's coming.
So you're just doing that then in Max?
In Logic.
Or Logic. Okay, yeah. And then
it's entirely Logic.
And everything.
Yeah. And then I've never had the situation where it's like, you have too many files and Logic can't process all this and your live input at the same time. I've had that happen for other pieces, but not for this one, thankfully. Or like I'm working in Logic and now it's decided to go kaput because of,
Well, it sounds like it's a system that works. If part of the piece is escalating your anxieties, continue doing it in Logic live is great.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that, but it's very true.
It's got a really nice kind of like Cagean aesthetic to it of controlled randomness, or even, well, in this case, anxiety-producing randomness beforehand, and creating the process that you have to react to, but not really knowing how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, for the most, like, I know it's like limited randomness, because I know kind of the basics of what I'm going to say, or what I'm going to be made to say, I guess. It's just when is it going to happen? What is it going to be? And like, sometimes I don't have to do that. Like, if I were to perform this piece tomorrow, I probably wouldn't need to make those changes, because it's been so long since the last time I performed it. I remember little enough of it that I think I'd be fine. But it also means I can't practice this piece at all.
Yeah.
Like, sound check for me is usually, okay, we're going to do about 30 seconds. All I need you to do is tell me that I'm balanced with the fixed media, and then I have to stop.
Yeah.
Like, this has to be short. I cannot go over.
Tell you that there's a balance, but there might be a problem and we won't know until like the performance or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be kind of keeping with the feel of the piece at the end, where you break down into the vocal fricatives and the sound stuttering.
Yeah, I mean, usually, thankfully, that doesn't like get overly loud. Obviously, it's not like sonically the greatest sound, as far as you know, if you tell the sound guy, hey, by the way, I'm just going to make a bunch of sibilants at the end, and it's not going to sound good. Don't change it.
Yeah.
Do you want a pop filter for that, or?
Well, it's funny because actually the sound guys at Seamus, we were talking at first, like, hey, what mic do you want to use? And I was like, I'm kind of looking at those 414s lovingly. Like, wouldn't it be nice? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, yeah. Let me get you a pop filter for that. I was like, no, because then you're not going to be able to see my face at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say the tech guys at Seamus this year at University of Oregon were phenomenal.
Yeah, they did a really good job. They definitely kept everything moving, and were pretty good about working with a medium that I'm assuming they probably didn't have any experience with. But sound is sound, more or less. So.
Nice.
Yep. Whether it's one channel or 16.
Yeah. It's true. Did they have 16 channel? Seamus?
I think one of the installations was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one with like the giant mono grid.
I think I missed it.
It was really cool.
I just remember the concert spaces.
Nice.
But
yeah, the concert spaces I think were 8.1 for everything.
Yeah. I just don't have the greatest memory, so it's totally possible I forgot.
So, this is obviously such a personal piece. Would you ever consider giving this to somebody else to perform? It's
something I think about a lot, and it's something I think could probably work. just fine. Like I have a lot of pieces that aren't explicitly for any instrument. Like Hold Still, my drawing piece, could be done by anybody as long as you install all the junk and more or less know how to draw. And this one, obviously, all you really need is a microphone. And I could set it up so it's just like fixed media, use max runtime, you're fine. There is the thing of, since part of it is, can you tell who's talking? It might be like a, hey, I need you to record some of these sentences and I'll make like a custom fixed media part for you, or you can do that yourself and that's fine. I think it would probably take some collaboration, a thing of like, hey, can you try this and we'll see how it sounds, and if it isn't too weird to have it be two different voices, because it could almost work, you know, you have kind of this imposing voice versus your own, as long as they were balanced right and kind of sounded like they came from the same space. I think it could probably still work.
Yeah. So
I know.
I've been... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you have seen the latest Blade Runner 2047, there's a scene where the character is being debriefed by a disembodied voice, and he's being forced to respond to all of these different questions very, very quickly. That could almost have that type of vibe if you gave it to another performer with your voice still doing the fixed parts.
Yeah. One thing... It took me a minute to realize what was going on, just in terms of format of this piece. That there's the phrase, there's the beep, and then you say it live too. I've been on and off doing these Spanish tapes, trying to learn to speak Spanish, and the format is like that.
It's true.
Yeah, and I just thought that was interesting, and also then an interesting choice to make of what the beep sounds like. I really liked the beep that you made, and how it changes over the course of the piece too. Pretty cool. Yeah,
I was trying to make something that it is a good beep. I definitely like the beep. I think it's just like the Logic's retro synth with a bunch of junk on it.
Yeah, right.
I'm a big fan of Bit Crushers.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like stay away from them now because I feel like I use them all the time. But at the same time, it's like, that's probably not a problem. They're too much fun. And like trying to make it really obvious in the beginning and then kind of fade away towards the end as you start feeling like you're not really sure when you're supposed to say things because it kind of gets lost in the mess. Also, I haven't seen the Blade Runner yet. I'm not very good about film, but it's a really good point, and it does kind of, it's a thing of, you have to wonder, how does that change the kind of relationship between the performer and the tape? The person and their voice versus the person and someone else's voice. Does it then sound more like you're being commanded to say something as opposed to it's coming from somewhere internal? I think they both work. They just work for different reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then on top of all of the vocal things that you have going on, and then the beep, you also have some really great drone textures moving underneath there as well.
So that is Stephen Hennessy, who was my classmate at UMW and used to be my roommate. At one point, we did one of those mic parts kits, you know, the ones where it's like $300 and they send you like the PCB and all the parts for it, and I think also the housing. I can't remember if he had his own housing, or I think he had his own housing, so that cheapens it. And when we finished it, which was a fun amount of soldering in a place that didn't really have any ventilation, we tried recording a couple things, and one of them was me playing, there's like a piece that's standard Heart repertoire called Impromptu Caprice by Gabriel Pierné that has this really, really, really French opening soloistic thing of like, you're doing these big arpeggiated chords, and then, you know, kind of these like emotive melodies, and it starts out major and then it's minor, and then, you know, eventually it leads into this like tiny little scale leading you up to the main melody. But basically when it was actually a lot of the things that I've made in the last year have been, I've initially made these sounds for class in some form. And then when I went back to write a piece, was like, okay, well, I'll use that. So that sound was essentially like my intro to Spear.
Oh yes.
So I grabbed there was I think it was one of the minor chords, like you do the arpeggio and then you let it sit for a second before you start the next chunk. I took basically just the resonance, which I think I only had 2 seconds of, and then stretched it out as far as I could, which bizarrely didn't have that usual, like, there's that, Spear has its own sound,
of like slightly
you can,
metallic
yeah,
everything.
You can tell when things are stretched out, but for whatever reason with this one, it was like, that's actually that's a really cool sound.
Nice.
I'll run with that. I can't remember if I made any changes to the partials themselves. I don't think I did, because I think the assignment was just take a short sound, stretch it out to the point where it no longer has any sense of temporality. But then I liked that so much, it was like, that's a really good drone. I'm just going to use that. So it's just that sound initially, kind of repeated over and over again. And then the bass that comes in partway through is just that transposed down. And then I have a pitch shifter on it so that after, I think, the first minute, 30 seconds, it kind of shifts up, which it shifts up and it also goes stereo at the same time to give you the sense of like,
yeah, extra. Totally.
And then for whatever reason, I just kind of, I like doing the thing of don't fade out your clips sometimes. So there's a lot of chunks, especially towards the end, where it's just like chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it, no fades. Which
and just build up and then immediate cut off.
Yeah.
No reverb tail, no delay, nothing.
Like that, the section towards the end where the drone starts getting chopped up. Initially, the drone just kept on going until the end. But in talking with several people, there was this thing of like, it feels like it doesn't change enough. Like, even though the text you're saying is changing and it's disturbing to watch you go through this process, it still doesn't feel like the music of it, the form of it is moving enough. So it was like, okay, well, what if I just screw up the ending? So I just, randomly threw in all these silences. And at first, when I listened to it, I was like, I kind of hate it. But then performing against it, I was like, oh man, it sucks so bad. Like having to like start saying words over these silent parts. It's like, okay, I guess I have to keep it now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's a really interesting technique too, because I mean that goes back to like the dawn of musique concrète.
Oh yeah.
But nowadays we're so acclimated to reversing samples and hearing the reversed snare build up and then cut off that we don't even think to try it anymore.
Yeah, I still like it. I mean, the basics are still great. And yeah, I think actually that harp sound is, now that I think about it, which would make sense. I didn't even remember it because it's just been so long since I made that sound. But yeah, I mean, all those things are still fun. They're still distressing.
Yeah.
And there's that section like 3/5 of the way through, I think, where the tape part starts making these things that are like, it just sounds like words have been rearranged or chunked up, or like you took the phonemes and rearranged them. That's still just that same thing. I think some of those are reversed. But it's mostly like, it was this thing of, I was trying to get through when I initially did this, I kind of recorded all the phrases and then started kind of just freestyling, like, here are all the things that are making me anxious right now. Like, here are all the ways in which this situation really sucks. And it's that thing of, I don't think I could share those just like right out there as the piece. Like the piece itself is already out there enough. So that section is kind of all of those, like, kind of the most sensitive parts that have just been scrambled. And there's a couple of them where I know what they're saying. Like one of them I think is the phrase public confession, but even though it's scrambled, it's that thing of like, when you read a word that's misspelled, but the first, like the starting and end letters are the same, you can still tell what words they are. Like there's some of that in there too. Yeah.
Nice. What a cool thing. And so much packed into a 5-ish minute piece.
Yeah. Eventually maybe I'll start writing longer pieces, but
No.
I often get this thing of like, I feel like I can do this in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And also if I made this longer, what more do I have to say with it? Which I think is kind of the strength of having this thing as being a multi-movement work, because they're each kind of specific chunks of, we're just going to feel this thing for 5 minutes and then we're going to feel something else.
Yeah.
That seems to work.
Yeah, make it really clear that this is an anxiety thing without really dumping anxiety on the audience too much. Yeah.
Well, to some, I mean, I get a lot of responses that's like, you know, this made me feel the way I feel when I feel my, like, you know, clinical anxiety.
Yeah.
Which at first I was like, oh God, I'm sorry. But then it was like, you know, I'm glad that you could kind of engage with this in a way that doesn't, you know, make you go into that state right now. Because that's kind of what it's been for me, and what a lot of my pieces kind of are for me, is this thing of they scare me a lot, but then it's really good to engage with the things I'm going through in a way that is kind of therapeutic, kind of cathartic, but doesn't say the whole truth. So
yeah, that was something that I had kind of noted down after listening to the pieces that we're talking about, that it seems like a lot of these are kind of compositionist therapy.
Yeah, that's what it winds up being a lot of the time. It's this funny thing that I have to eventually grapple with, is like, all right, you know, eventually all these problems are going to get solved, and I'm going to have to do something that's not just like, I'm hurting, which, you know, I've done some of, but it's this thing of like, you know, I like right now I'm trying to do this thing that's like, what if we just took Birdsong and turned that into dubstep, like the thing that Messiaen always wanted to do but never could have managed, and just do something that's like cute and fun instead of like super heavy. So I feel like that's kind of the next, not necessarily fun all the time, but just, you know, kind of a different mood. So
yeah, sounds like a great thing.
Next stage.
Yeah, I also like the truth that we don't all have to be tragic, starving, fractured artists to make art and stuff. But but it's such a common format too. So
and it's like it's not that I would someone that I want to be all of the time. It's just this thing of like, if you sit down and write and it's like, man, I don't think I'm going to be able to write about anything else but this. It's like, well, I guess you kind of have to. Get it out of you.
Well, and writing always kind of focuses the author or the composer to look inward to a certain extent too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always writing from our own perspective and drawing on what has informed that perspective.
Yeah. It's very true. Also something I wound up experimenting with this semester was kind of doing a similar sort of text-based thing that I do, but using someone else's story and someone else's voice. So I did a collaboration with a dancer where I think I eventually had like an hour's worth of her talking, and kind of pared that down into a narrative that she could dance to, which is interesting. So it's part of growth.
Yeah. Now, you do a lot of stuff that uses text as well.
Yes.
So the next piece that we have is Some Favorite Gem, which uses text segments tied to melodic ideas in a piece for Fixed Media and Saxophone Quartet.
Yep. So Some Favorite Gem was every year UVA brings in an ensemble to kind of like everyone in the department, all the first through fourth years, write for this ensemble, and then there's a concert and we record all the works. I was very late in working on this piece and getting it to them, which obviously happens. Like, it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was like, you know, they come in for their first rehearsal and it's like, hey, I know you guys haven't seen this music yet, but I promise you can do it. So here, have some parts. Like, you're just going to be with a click track. It's going to be fine. Because it was like this, when I was working on Some Favorite Gem, there were like, I think 5 different iterations of what I thought it was going to be. And it was that same thing of, you know, if there's something that you do need to write about, you're not going to really be able to write anything else until you get it. And there were several versions of me thinking I knew what that something was. And then I'd get to like the, I don't know, 2-minute mark of the Fixed Media and then be like, where is a saxophone going to go here? I don't know what to do. And eventually it was kind of the week of, and I was like, all right. I think it was because my therapist had pointed me to and I mentioned this on the website also, there's this, I think she's a sociologist researcher at a university in Texas that I don't remember now, Brene Brown, she does all this, she's a shame researcher, which is a really fun, terrible title. She says in one of the TED Talks that it's like a great way to get people to stop talking to her on airplanes. It's like, well, that's a bad topic for me.
I mean, I just tell people on airplanes that I have my service tarantula sitting in my bag, and would they like to pet it instead?
Do you actually say that?
No.
Okay.
No.
I think it would be funny if you, because then they could probably be like, ah, and then get you thrown off the plane or something. Don't do
I'll
that,
use
Ben.
that the next time I'm carrying a synth or something onto a plane, and they're like, "Oh, we can't let you put that in the overhead bin, even though it's totally able to fit in there."
Yeah.
It's my service synthesizer. How dare you?
Well, I understand that feeling, but also I have never taken my harp on a plane, so
Yeah.
hopefully I will never experience that emotion. Any more than just like, no, you're not taking my laptop. I'm keeping it with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that this is wrong. Where was I going with that?
Well, so you were talking about
Shame research.
Shame research. That's right. So I listened to both of her TED Talks, both of which are really interesting, that kind of follow her personal trajectory as far as like, she was like a shame researcher, and the whole point is that if you can accept things about yourself and not immediately blame yourself for all your mistakes, then it's usually, I think the end summary is that people who believe they are loved also believe that they are deserving of love. And if you feel an inordinate amount of shame, then you also don't believe that you're deserving of love. So then, like, you believe that all this stuff is your fault, and that no one should be around you and all that. And I wasn't feeling exactly that, but it was similar enough to the thing that I was experiencing that I was like, oh crap. I guess this is actually the thing that I need to be writing about. It's not, I don't need to be doing this like, I don't know, expose piece about like, here's what happened to me. But it's like, no, this is how I'm feeling about, how I'm processing or badly processing this experience. And, what that feels like. So that's what the piece ended up being, was kind of very similarly to to Tomorrow When I Grow Up, was I picked a couple things of this is how I'm feeling right now, and then kept it simple because I was trying to make it so that maybe to someone, probably not to everyone, because this is not like an easy thing to force people to do, that if you hear the musical thing and the text thing at the same time enough times, if you hear the music without the text, then you will get the sense of the text, because essentially you've almost been forced to learn this vocabulary.
Kind of a Pavlovian conditioning. Yeah,
a little bit. That is really true, which I think works well in some parts of the piece, like the did I deserve this? Like the kind of two high notes on the soprano sax. I think that comes across. Some of the other ones don't as well, but I'm fine with that, because it's not really a skill that we typically have to are forced to learn. It's almost like data sonification in reverse. But not quite, because it's not like I'm picking specific things about these words and the amount of vowels in them or something is controlling the contour of the melody. It's just here is a melody that felt kind of similar to these words, and if I throw this at you enough, will you be able to remember it? So
yeah, I was wondering about that because I was trying to analyze, is there a rhythmic pattern that's related to what the speech segments are, or is there some sort of pitch correlation? Are you going spectralist and analyzing that, or what?
No, I mean,
couldn't find anything, so.
Maybe it would be smarter if I had, but mostly I was trying to. So I recorded all the text parts to a beat because it does have to use a click track. So I tried to record the text to the click as well as I could. And it took a couple iterations before it was like, I think this is probably the one that I want.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was kind of just an intuitive thing for the most part. My main thing was I wanted to make the melodic fragments as different from each other as I could manage, which was mostly contour. Because like the pitches themselves don't mean a whole lot because there's that whole section in the middle where they're almost doing this circle of fifths, trading the what is it? All the words repeat in my head over and over and over again. They're just kind of trading that throughout. So the pitches themselves aren't hugely meaningful. It's mostly the contour of them.
Yes. I guess again I haven't seen this piece live either, but in the picture that you have on the website, or on your website for the page for this piece, there's a couple computer monitors and it looks like some microphones on stands.
That was because we were doing all of the like all of the pieces that we had written for that ensemble. We were doing them all in the same concert, so that was kind of just a picture someone took of them playing either like mid-concert or mid-rehearsal. So the monitors were actually for my friend Ben Robertson's piece, which had like a live max patch that was showing them which pitches they were going to play next. But mine was exclusively click track. So somewhere on stage there was just a headphone splitter. What are those called? It's not a splitter. Headphone amp. Yeah, headphone amp. So each person just got an individual click track. And at first I was trying to shy away from that because I try and make things so that there's not like a huge financial cost for the ensemble performing it. But then it's like, headphone amps aren't really that expensive. Like you can get them on Sweetwater, I think for like $50 if you want to.
Yeah. That's not this point either, right? Yeah.
So I just leaned into it and was like, this is the way that this piece is going to make sense. And it also made it so with the somewhat artificial time constraint I had put on myself, it made it a lot easier for them to deal with the fixed media and trying to orient themselves around it. So
yeah, I mean it sounds reasonable.
Practical choices, also compositional choices, but
right. I mean, and that's like some would say that's what composition is mapping these ideas to these practical constraints of instruments.
Right, and having those practical constraints is the one thing that I find really kind of helps take away the terror of the blank page or the blank max patch. When you're staring at it, you're like, I want to do all the things and all the stuff, and oh, good Lord, I don't know how to program this.
But also, which of all the things? Because there's so many all the things.
Exactly.
So, since you went so far as to have them like get a headphone amp, I know that people make this choice differently depending on the piece. Do you have them amplify or do any matching to the sound coming out of the speakers?
When they played it at UVA, they also played it at, I think, Spectrum in New York. We did not mic them. I don't think we mic'd them for any of the pieces, actually. There were only two, mine and one other, that had fixed media, and then there was only one that had live electronics. And that was the only one we mic'd. And in the space that we played it in, it was fine to not mic them.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that usually for most, in the Barn Dance or any other concerts I run, it's pretty standard at this point that you usually mic the performer even if you don't need it. But in that case, it was like, this really isn't necessary. Like, Old Cabell Hall is super reverberant, and you probably don't want to put any more through the speakers than you absolutely need to. So we didn't then, but yeah, I think I put somewhere in the score that it's like you can mic them if you need to, but if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable again.
Yeah.
Always good to have the option. You don't need it.
Nice.
If nothing else, having that as an option gives you a quick way to record it directly into Logic as well while it's
very true. But I wound up getting a recording. They actually, the ensemble kind of had a snafu the next day when we were supposed to record, but luckily, since mine used a click, it was easy enough for the tenor player to then switch over to alto and play the alto part
nice.
synced up afterwards. So
great. Yeah. again, practical successes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of accidental success
Yeah, great.
through practical choices.
Well, and then on the subject of practical choices, for the third piece that you sent us, very close to me, you are using a lot of what looks like stock footage.
Yeah, so very close to me was a collaboration I did with Heather Meese, who's the other first year, I guess, soon to be second year at my program. So we put this together because we had been interested in doing something together because we have like kind of similar aesthetics, not completely, but it would be enough to be like, this could be fun. So she does a lot of work with film, and she did all of the film. So this was basically a bunch of like 16 millimeter home video footage that I think she got from eBay. I don't totally remember. I know that her process was she digitized them first and then took the original film again and then painted over it, which is like all of the splotches of color that you see, and then digitized that, and then used all of that film to kind of splice into the video part of the piece itself. And that was something that we kind of talked about from the beginning, that it would be neat to have, well, I guess I should talk about the piece first, but it would be neat to have kind of this dichotomy of something that feels like a very close relationship with all of these kind of unrelated, almost family photo type things. So very close to me is when we were talking about it, we were saying like, it'd be kind of neat to do a fake ASMR piece. And for the listening audience that doesn't know what ASMR is, it stands for, automatic sensory meridian response. I can't remember what the A is now.
Autonomous
sensory meridian response, which is kind of a non-scientific name, but it's sort of the one that the community convened upon eventually when it became a really big thing. So basically it's the thing of if you hear something and you get like head tingles or goosebumps or something like that, it means that you get ASMR. So there's like a whole community of people making videos and audio in this style that's either supposed to like relax you or put you to sleep or something like that.
And some of those videos are super creepy.
Oh, some of them are super creepy. I have been a personal consumer of ASMR since I think 2013. Many similar to, but yes, many of them are very strange. And that was kind of what we wanted to play with was, they come in all types. Some of them are just like, it's a video of someone with a 3DO, which is one of those like binaural microphones. It's essentially a rectangle with two silicone ears on the sides and nothing on the top or bottom, like pretending to put stuff in your ears or bite your ears or like say soft things in your ears or something like that. To like stuff of the thing that we were playing with this was that there are all these role play videos that are like you're going to the doctor or to like a hairdresser or I don't know, you've gotten abducted by aliens and this is like the alien talking to you or something. There's a lot of those.
And that's supposed to relax you.
Well, because it's like, don't worry. You're here with me. We're going to be fine. Which could be really creepy, but usually it's okay. Some of them actually do play with the creepy element, but it was this thing of a lot of them, like let's say you're going to a fake hairdresser. It's like, hey, so what did you do this week? Pause. Oh, that sounds fun. Which is like, there's this pause where almost in this like Blue's Clues manner, you're supposed to insert your text. But you don't, because that would be weird because you're not 5. So it's almost this thing of, and it's kind of the same with a lot of like, YouTube personalities where you feel like you know them really well. But of course they've never met you. They don't know who you are. And yet they are pretending to have this really close relationship with you. Sometimes like literally intimately close to you, where they are like in your ears or cutting your hair or something like that. And the fact that you can like kind of synthesize this relationship with someone and feel close to them at the same time, not at all. So kind of textually what we were playing around with initially was this sense of like, it's weird that someone's in your ears and it's creepy that you're talking about the body this way, and the fact that like you don't matter in the context of this video at all because you are technically not in it. So it kind of starts out with this sort of normal ASMR thing of like, hi, how are you doing? It's so good to see you today. And then later goes on to this thing of like, I can't hear you. Are you listening? To like this weird thing of like, how come I can't feel you with my hands? Where are you? To like, you don't mean much in context. So it's kind of just, we were trying to do this simultaneous thing of mimicking the ASMR video, not really parodizing it, but using it as a way of talking about itself. So for the most part, it's almost this thing of, because a couple people told me like it would be interesting if when you got to this kind of crazy section, because there's a crescendo, I think around the 4-minute mark or so, like it would be interesting if you did actual poetry here. But it's like, no, we kind of wanted to talk about, both how weird this experience is in general, like you don't realize it, but it is very strange. And just kind of the way people talk in these videos and how they don't talk to you at all, as opposed to like going into any kind of specific poetic form. So
yeah, I was wondering if it was maybe commentary on the idea of dementia or false reality, or sort of nostalgia is creating a false reality in the person's mind.
Yeah, I guess in a sense, yeah. We also it was more the thing of being heard and not being heard, but I guess you could also say dementia is a state of not hearing and not being heard, because you are unable to process the current time information with any of your memories because those are locked away from you. Right. But in the case of this, it was more something about like identity and which I guess could still be dementia. I'm kind of like processing your question as I'm rambling. But this thing of do you know the person who's talking to you? How does it matter to you? Do you realize that you don't know them? But also this thing of a little bit from the perspective of the person doing the video, this thing of I am saying all of these things to you. Why aren't you there? Like, why can't I hear you? Like, why am I leaving these pauses? Because I don't think we actually ask any questions apart from just like, how are you doing? That are easy to answer. Like, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly. Like, I, the person talking, don't understand what's going on, and I don't understand why there isn't anyone there. So that's we've also done this piece live. So for the live version, we cut out most of the like pre-recorded text and instead kind of do it ourselves, but we leave like the bell sounds and the crinkling and the singing, because we're only 2 people and we can't do all of those things. Like we were initially saying like, oh, well, we could sing. And it's like, no, I think we have to talk. I think we have to talk the entire time. So when we performed it, it wound up being more about identity and the stress of not being heard. So kind of like using ASMR as this platform to talk about other things, but still talking about a little bit about how weird ASMR is.
That's the idea that talks about itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sweet. And that's really interesting that the live version ended up having to be a little bit different.
Yeah. I think it was more different in that we get a lot more like, so the way that we recorded this initially is I tried to do it as legit as I could. I think I probably should have done it differently, but basically I found in our makerspace we had like one of those styrofoam heads, and I stuck a couple. Which roads are the small condensers? Is that
the NT5 or the M5?
Fives. Yeah, the NT5s. I can never remember because I've experienced the 1, the 4, and the 5, and because everything in this world is numbers, I don't always remember which number goes with which thing.
Well, you go through the 1, the 4, and the 5, and you go back to the 1.
Oh God, I didn't even think about that.
Sorry.
So basically, I just shoved the microphones in the not shoved because that would probably screw up the capsule, but like stuck them as close to the foam ears as I could, which is like, I guess the thing that you're supposed to do with binaural recording, and it wound up super noisy. So thanks University's isotope license for saving the day there.
RX to the rescue.
Oh my God. I'm sure like there's other ways I could have done it, but it was this thing of like, no, let's do it legit. It'll be great because, you know, a whole part of this, like the intimacy of the experience is the fact that you're talking around somebody's head. So, ooh, I feel like I got way louder there for a second. So when we first did it, you know, we did the thing where you get in the studio, you turn out the lights, you turn out on like the sort of dimmer lights that aren't fluorescents so that it's not super noisy, and kind of took turns saying some things at the head. So kind of this, it's almost the thing of the venue creates the mood of the thing that you're recording. So in that kind of dark space where you're talking into a head, it made it more kind of like quiet and intimate. Whereas when we did it live, it wound up being a lot more about stress, and a lot louder. And there wound up being a lot more like, instead of the usual like sk, 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 it wound up being a lot more of, you know, I think the thing I was saying the most was, I can't hear you, but it was this thing of like, I can't hear you. And kind of this like, you know, a lot more stress face. You know, I had a friend who was like, that was, you know, knowing you personally, that was actually really distressing. So, I don't know. I think that's just the thing of the live experience is always so much different from the fixed experience. But it was also just this thing of, it gave us, you know, we wrote the piece in February, and then when we did it live, I think earlier this month, it gave us an opportunity to think about it again, as far as, you know, did we say the things that we wanted to? And I think we did at the time. But talking about it again gave us a chance to kind of revisit and say, like, do we want to say something different? And given that whole thing, when we do it live, is essentially improv, apart from like, it's probably going to start with, hi, how are you doing today? That, you know, it's going to change a lot. So,
yeah. So I'm sorry, I got distracted by something for a second. Did you say that when you do it live, do you do the head thing with the mics?
No.
That would be really.
That would be really cool. But it's that problem of like,
yeah.
I guess it wouldn't matter. It's that thing of, since binaural audio really only works well with headphones anyway, it wouldn't work as well with the head. I actually hadn't thought of that at all, though. That would be kind of neat. But it would also be like, we both recorded separate passes around the head when we recorded it the first time. So would it be weird, like, you know, when you're both around the same kind of confined space and it's like, okay, I'm going to pan left to right now. It's like, ah!
Come on.
And we were in it's that classic thing of like, there's, I don't know, 3 other groups in this concert. So we have to try and, you know, constrain space, but that's an interesting idea. I just hadn't thought about it. And we also, the other problem was we had other pieces in that concert, or like as part of our set. And I think we were both using our 58s for something else. So I guess we could have just set it up and then done other stuff after. But yeah, I hadn't thought of that at all.
But I mean, and like getting more theatrical.
Yeah.
Yeah, less practical and more. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, one of my favorite things I like to do is to figure out how to do complicated tech things live, or things that all happened in Logic, figuring out a way to do with live sampling and stuff. And that's cool to hear about the noise reduction on the voice, because I was going to ask what you did to make it sound the way it sounds.
I mean, there's also an aggressive amount of EQ on all the voices that wasn't really necessary. Like if I was trying to be as legit as I could to the medium, I probably wouldn't use that much EQ at all. But I don't know. I think part of it was either trying to make it sound so that you were closer, closer physically to the person, or this idea of that they are farther away from you than they should be. So playing around with this thing of identity of like, how close am I to you really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Something about it also got this kind of like clinical, not hi-fi microphone thing going on too. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's nice.
I mean, if most of your microphone is in a styrofoam head,
yeah,
there's a lot you're losing.
Yeah, it's great. And
at the same time, though, I think that could become a respected technique.
Yeah,
the styrofoam
maybe.
head.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the thing about those, like, I know Shure sells some like $6,000 binaural microphone that is actually an entire head with its like, you know, very sort of Soviet style planed face kind of thing. Yeah. That sounds fantastic. So like those exist, but live performance with the physical styrofoam head could be interesting. The problem with that though is that there is a lot of like facial expression that you lose when you're trying to orient yourself around something like that. Because looking at the photos of that concert later, we made a lot of really angry faces. I know that I definitely did. And it would be a lot harder to kind of make them and make the same kinds of sounds if you're kind of sideways to something. Yeah. But I don't know, you have me thinking about the practical element. I guess it's the same thing as at Seamus thinking about using the 414 and someone saying, well, you should use a pop filter. And it's like, nah, okay. Maybe the condenser is not the right way to go here.
Yeah, maybe just a 58, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Nice. Getting the right tool.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've almost not talked about the video side of this piece, and there's so much wonderful stuff. You said the painting over the after, I guess, imported all. I was trying to think of the right word for digitizing all of the footage and then painting and everything together. It's really, really cool stuff. Also, making the choices of how to translate it to live is always really interesting. But what were you saying, Ben?
Well, I was just going to say, what was the process for painting? Was it just, I'm going to randomly streak color down the 35mm film, or I'm just going to drop it through a bath of dye, or...
I'm pretty sure in some form it was splatter paint. I can't speak to the video as much. I can give you kind of my experience of it, which was Heather saying, hey, I'm going to go digitize all this film. Okay, cool. Then she comes back, and it's like, all right, now I'm going to paint it. She paints it over the weekend, and the only exposure I have to that is the fact that there is a plastic trash can outside of her, out of her like front door that I can see as I'm driving past that has a bunch of paint splatters in it. And I'm like, I wonder why there's a trash can outside of Heather's door. And then later on, I see the re-digitized film with the paint on it, and it's like, oh, that was the reason for the trash can. So she may have just thrown all the film in the bucket and kind of like splatter painted into it. But that I'm not entirely sure of. I could always ask Heather, and then we could kind of add a little addenda into the show notes or something. But what I can say is that when it comes to film, like, I'm always really kind of overwhelmed by like the amount of process that goes into Heather's videos. Like, she has all these. There was one that she did that was entirely like scans of fruits, but it's not like I scanned the fruit and then I transformed it in After Effects. It's like, no, I made 100 scans of fruit in my scanner and then I transformed them in After Effects, which is like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, working with audio, I try and make things kind of as simple for me as I can, but obviously there's this whole part to the process for her that's about the amount of time that it takes. So all I can say is I don't know the entire process, but I know it took a lot longer than I think it does. Because I know later on I helped her like spool it back up, and it was just this giant plate of spaghetti, of 16mm spaghetti that had paint all over it.
The classic ball of Christmas tree lights that you take out of the attic, or
Well, actually, no. Okay, because I know that she had a bunch of blank tape also. So she actually, after she'd painted it, she spliced the entire thing together the way that she wanted it, more or less, without really knowing how it would be. Because when you have 16 millimeter, do you know what it's going to look like? And then digitized it, and then without any changes, essentially, that was the footage. So
Nice.
hers was an almost entirely analog process.
Wow.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. So the way that the process worked was we recorded it first, and she was kind of working on the video simultaneously, and then I put together kind of a mix of the sounds that we'd had that kind of fit a form that we kind of agreed on. And then I had to leave because I think I was doing root signals that weekend. But I have this thing where I sort of overpack my fixed media. Like a lot. So I know that she like took things out because it's that thing of like, you have a video also, like,
Yeah,
you know, it's not that you're going to fry someone's attention span. It's just like, you know, it would be appropriate with less of this.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, they won't be able to see for all the things they hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's sweet.
Oh.
I'm a little taken aback by the process of all this.
Yeah.
And those. So one thing I was thinking about the first two pieces, which is now informed by our discussion of the third piece. So, like I said, I'm really interested in doing weird things in performance to achieve something that was made with a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be really intrigued to see performances of these first two pieces that had, like, say tomorrow when I grow up, if somebody else was controlling when the pre-recorded stuff happened. That's
a really good point.
That would just, but it would obviously be really different.
Yeah, it'd be really different, but it would still be really interesting. It would almost have that. What was it? It's not the Stanford experiments. What was the one with the buzzer that doesn't electrocute you, but there's an actor that pretends to get electrocuted?
It wasn't Stanford. That was the prison experiment.
Yeah.
Was it the same guy, Philip Zimbardo?
It might be. Oh gosh. Well, time to look it up.
Yeah.
Experiment. Milgram?
Milgram?
Yeah, Milgram experiment. That's the one. Because then you'd have that thing of you have the authority figure controlling the bell versus you that's like being oppressed, which is again like it creates a different dynamic, but it's not a bad different dynamic.
It's a different dynamic.
Yeah, yeah, completely different dynamic, but it still is interesting. I think it's that thing of like that's the kind of thing that I want to play with in the second movement of that piece.
Yeah.
Is like the fact that someone is controlling, probably not a beep, but in some way like the fact that the piece can progress at all. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. Like, I guess I came on this podcast to collaborate.
Well, you didn't want to impose ideas.
No. So, yeah, it's always good. Like people always. I tend to get people coming up to me afterwards and it was like, Hold Still is the one where I'm like drawing a face for the duration of the piece. And I had someone come up to me afterwards after one of the performances because it's supposed to be my face that I'm drawing, kind of, since I don't have like a what's the word? A reference for myself at all to look at while I'm drawing. Someone asked me afterwards at one point, was it like, oh, is this supposed to be, is it the thing of the way that you say in the piece that you were trying to draw your friend as fast as you could before she woke up? Is the point of the piece that you're supposed to draw this face as fast as you can before the piece finishes? I was like, no, but that's a really cool way of interpreting it. So I'm always open. Art is interesting. Everyone has a different interpretation on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's also wonderful to see just how recent these three pieces we talked about are. So, like, Tomorrow When I Grow Up is still, this isn't the end of the story for that piece. So the other two are pretty set where they are.
Yeah, more or less. I think very close to me is going to change probably every time we do it, just because we kind of have a script, but it's definitely one where depending on what you're feeling and how it's essentially improvised. So yes, it's going to change every time. I think some favorite gem is mostly going to be the way it is at this point. I could change it, but it's that thing of I'd also have to change the score.
Yeah. It's work.
That would stink.
A slight bit more work than just changing a couple of things in electronics.
Which would be fine. Maybe I guess I could put something in there that's like, this part is improvised. Just listen to what you hear. But since it's so like, musical sound and textual sound have to happen at the same time, for that to be improvised, I don't know, I'd have to make some kind of like reverse score follower where it's like, things are going to be happening. Keep your eyes open. So there's that. But then, yeah, tomorrow when I grow up, the first version of that, the very least complete version of it I performed at West Fork New Music Festival in September of last year. So that is the oldest of any of them.
Yeah. Which is still pretty recent.
Yeah. I guess part of that is I am in school, so
yeah, right.
I think of like you got to be making stuff, but it is good for me as well because kind of I am relatively recent as far as actually writing music because I kind of didn't start in earnest until my victory lap of undergrad.
Nice.
So like I kind of only have 2 pieces before this one, and they are I think 2016 and 2017 respectively. So
okay.
Yeah. So there's more stuff getting created now, which is great. I feel like that's one of the big things about grad school is like being forced to write makes you explore your ideas in a more frequent and more pressure related way.
Yeah.
Definitely more pressure.
Yeah. For real.
Yep. Well, along those lines, so we've heard about the future for tomorrow when I grow up. Are there any other projects you've got down the line or things you're working on?
Yeah, so there were 2 other pieces that I considered sending. I still kind of considered sending even like yesterday when I got back into town, but I figured that probably wouldn't be enough time, like lead time. So one of them was the dance piece that I talked about earlier. That like in addition to a fixed media of her talking about her experiences with like homes and houses and moving, and how that relates to her sense of identity, there's also like a like what's it called? Adafruit Flora accelerometer that's on her. So like as she's moving, there's a couple things that are changing that I still have to finish because I think it's getting performed this Friday. So like all the problems that I've been having with the accelerometer, I have to find a way to fix real soon. So that's still in process. And then I made my baby's very first entirely in Max piece. That was, I had wanted to write this for a long time. Or like it was that initial idea of like, man, this would be really cool. I really want to write this, but wasn't comfortable enough in Max to think that I could do it. And just being forced to have to make it essentially for class because I realized it would be a good final project was all the impetus I needed. So the original idea was that the piece is a trip. So you take not a drugs trip, but a physical car trip. So it's about, going on really long car rides. So you take your origin and your destination, and I have a thing that took me way too long to make that basically gets the directions from Google Maps and then uses the HTML5 speech synthesis API to give you those directions spoken in the Google Maps lady directions voice, and then throws that in Max. And then over the duration of the piece, it spaces those out. So like if it's a 3-hour car ride that has like 14 directions, it'll proportionally space that out over like 6 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you want to do it. And then a couple other things like, the sound of cars going over bumps or cars passing you, like a really glitchy radio that's like, you know, if you're on FM radio and you're between two stations on the same frequency and they keep like shuttering in and out, that is still in process because I don't know if I really like it yet. It's still that thing of like, I like making things that have meaning, and it still doesn't totally feel like it has it, even though it kind of does phenomenologically. So there's that. And then I've also really wanted to do stuff, because I also do web design, kind of audio experiences that involve the web that don't also involve just press play or, or like go on YouTube and then press play. So not that, well, there are problems with YouTube. I don't know what I was going to go on there. But just some kind of an interactive audio experience that uses the web and kind of our associations with various things online in a way that I've probably seen before, but not enough. So I feel like since I have these evil powers, I should use them.
Yeah, use them for good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one other question.
Sure.
I wanted to get it in for the end. So your tenure at Electric Acoustic Barn Dance has come to a close.
Mm-hmm.
In your time as technical director, are there things that you learned that you'd like to pass on?
Oh my God. I think probably almost, maybe not everything that I've learned, but so much of the stuff that I can say I've learned through doing that festival.
Yeah.
Is it just like, do you have advice you can give for people who are running festivals or like running tech or something like that? Or
I feel like probably a good chunk of our listeners are in that position of having to set up things for other people sometimes.
Okay. My worst trait as a boss, in quotes, is being able to delegate. So thing one, always make sure you have enough people. Always make sure that you can give them jobs. It's usually good to have one person that you know that you can count on to teach people things that you don't necessarily have time to teach them depending on the length of your tech. So like the way that we always do the barn dance is there's always someone on the board, which is usually me. And then you have what I call the computer person, who's essentially the person who's controlling logic and like opening files in between clapping and whatnot. Or like getting videos set up, or sometimes essentially being your like second in command and saying like, okay, now go like take the video cable and take it to this laptop. So like always have a second. I mean, always have a bunch of people, but always have a second, because you will always be more successful if you never have to leave the board, which always means have other humans and trust them. Make sure that it's that kind of thing of you have to make them excited for the thing that they're doing. So make sure that they feel that they have agency in the choices that they can make, and that they are kind of emboldened to do a good job. Because usually they will be, and if you like are excited enough about the thing yourself, that will usually become infectious enough that they will also want to do a good job. That's like kind of lesson one from Mark Snyder is like, you know, if you love the thing you do a lot, it will spread to other people. And then always keep an eye on the clock all the time. That's like, try and move as fast as you can. Obviously, everyone needs an opportunity, and never keep anyone from that opportunity. But if you move quickly, if there are problems, you can always get back to someone later. But if you spend a lot of time on the person who's having trouble, then you will have a lot more trouble through other people. So, yeah, there's probably a lot more advice where that came from. But oh my God, the ultimate thing is, stay as prepared as you think you can be. Make sure that you have enough stuff to cover everything that you're trying to put on. But things will still happen, so make sure you're flexible when they do.
That is definitely good advice.
Yeah. as you started answering, I realized I was asking entirely just for myself. Like, I wanted some advice.
I mean, if you have other questions, like,
Yeah, no,
always
it's
answer those. The information is free, and everybody deserves to have a good concert and put on a good concert. So, any questions you have, obviously I can only speak to my own experience, and I am no Matt McCabe, but gosh darn it, I still do my best.
Excellent.
All right. Well,
oh yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say it is about that time.
All right.
We have to move into the dreaded 2-minute challenge.
I don't know what it is.
So the 2-minute challenge is the thing that we do toward the end of each episode. Either Ben or I. Normally we alternate. I realized that Ben did the last 2 in a row, so I'm gonna have to catch up on some. But yeah, we take 2 minutes to try to explain or give an overview as much detail as we can of some concept, or some electroacoustic thing, or something loosely related at least. Yeah, and so it's my turn this month, and what I want to talk about is magnetic tape as a medium. However, I came up with this idea relatively late, and as I was doing my research, I realized I wanted to do way more research in order to actually do a good job to talk about this. So I'm going to be editing that in at the end of this, or in a couple hours, basically, after I do a lot more reading.
You're not just going to read my 4-point history or 5-point history of it?
Yeah, right. So I'll give you that. Okay. Here, Ben, start the timer. Okay. All right, ready, set, go. Wire recorder, or step 1, wire recorder. Step 2, dictaphone. Step 3, Nazis. Step 4, question mark. Step 5, profit. Yeah.
And that's the history of audio tape.
Yeah, ding ding. Way under the buzzer. But yeah, and so after watching Very Close to Me and thinking about analog processes and other things like that. That was part of where it came from, trying to talk about that. Realizing that we hadn't spent much time talking about that in a technical, mechanical standpoint. Mm-hmm. So that's what that'll be once I record it tonight.
Well, we'll splice that in.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But props on doing like a question mark profit joke that actually was legit and not just like profit.
It was actually profit. Yeah,
there's actually profit.
Yeah, well, there was something about Nuremberg and losing patents due to war crimes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about the world of tape is that it started so long ago, and but they're still making technical advances in it. It was 4 years ago Sony developed a 185 terabyte reel of tape, or the technology to that detail. And so people will still use it for long-term, slow, high-capacity storage because it's so much cheaper than even hard drives, which is hard to imagine these days. Yeah. Anyway. So that's the 2-minute challenge.
All right.
Nice.
Well, excellent job there, Nate.
Thanks. And
I really cannot believe the part about Godzilla in there, but wow.
I'm half tempted to just use the original audio from that, but we'll see. Anyway. Well, so thanks so much for this time. Do you have any other events that you'd like to plug? I know it's summer now, or other things coming up that you mentioned.
I mean, I feel like the things that I'm working on / with that are coming up are like, well, you've missed the deadline, because I think I'm going to be volunteering for NIME and also playing in an ensemble piece for NIME, because it's being co-hosted by UVA, where I go, and Virginia Tech, which is where it's being hosted. Okay. So I think I'm part of like a 12 person. I think it's a 12-person, 20-minute, mostly improvised piece, where we're all like split up into sub-instruments. So go to NIME if you're going to NIME. You could also go to NIME if you're not going to NIME, but that's a weird logic problem. Then there's also I'm helping out with tech for the Splice Institute this summer.
Okay.
But at this point, that's also a thing of like, if you're going to Splice, you should go to Splice. If you're not going to Splice,
Sorry.
I guess you could still go to Splice, but I don't think you can actually.
Yeah.
Not really sure how that works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of these years, the stars will align, and I'll be able to go to Splice.
Same here. Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. But I live like 40 minutes away from there, so it's the same. But
well, I think this is the summer camp one instead of the festival one. So,
cool.
yeah. So different thing. Unless you wanted to go to the summer camp one, I think Scott Blasco's going actually. So I think it's kind of a, any age you want to, still go to camp.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, why should it only be limited to people under the age of 18?
Exactly.
Simply not fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Splice, festival, submissions, emerging composer, awards, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Well, cool. Well, so the people who are already going to those things, we'll get to see you there.
We'll go to those things, and I will see them there. I don't know what your upload schedule is. If it's by the time this comes out, NIME will already have started. So it's like, if you're going to NIME, you'll be at NIME already. Hi.
Hey.
Well, it's summertime, so this will probably actually be in the next couple days.
Okay,
So,
that's true. Everybody's semesters are over at this point. I'm
Yeah.
assuming we all will do a chorus of "Oh, thank God."
Yeah. Exactly.
That it is over.
Yep.
Oh, spring semester.
Yeah. I'm imagining your first piece that, oh, thank God, beep. Oh, thank God.
Oh,
Oh,
it's true.
dear.
It's too true.
Yeah.
Oh, but also there's NSEM. So I don't know when the call for that is going to come out. I think they usually do it I think it's due by November or something, but ours is going to be in early February instead of early March. So I'm assuming that call will probably come out in August or something and be due by October. So look out for that if you're an undergrad or graduate student doing any kind of electroacoustic composition.
Nice.
Or even if you're not and you just have a piece and you're in school. Because those are great too.
Sweet.
Hey, yeah.
What's that acronym? What is that?
National
NSCME.
Student Electronic Music Event.
That's right. Yeah, you mentioned it.
It's a completely anarchic festival that trades hosts every year, and there's no central board except for Adam Vitkacis is the one who maintains the social media. So yeah, he was explaining this to me the other day of it's been going on for so long and it's still working and it's crazy. It's this anarchy, and I just commented back to him, I inherit the beast. Because that's what it feels like.
Sweet.
But
Well, fair enough.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah. And thanks to you guys. It's been fun talking and hanging out on this here Tuesday.
Indeed. The day after Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Extend the weekend by one day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And then do it again.
Mhm.
Woo.
Yeah. Well, I guess there you have it. This has been another episode of Patch In, episode 44. We're going to call this the May episode. right here at the end. And, but yeah, so thanks for listening. You can check our show notes at soundnotion.tv/PI. That's where we've got the show notes for this episode and all our past episodes. You go to soundnotion.tv. You can also check out the other podcasts that we've had in the soundnotion.tv network. There's also a couple of places to donate there if you're interested in that kind of thing. Yeah, good reviews in the iTunes store, any of those kind of things are always nice ways to support. But yeah, thanks again for listening. My name's Nick Lighton.
I'm Ben Furman.
See you next month. and thanks, Becky.
I'm Becky Brown. And I'm not part of the show. Apart from being on it.
All right, thanks. See ya.
All right.